Welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. It's still the 20th of April 2018 and we're still on 9/11. This is the third part on 9/11 and it just goes to show you how expansive it is. It seems to have so many different bits to it that you can look at and say, well, this doesn't make sense, or, you know, there could be an alternative view. So it just seems to be too many bits. So another thing is the PNAC report. Now the PNAC report is the one that came up. It was written for 2001 and was about, I think, how they could rebuild America, a new America, you know, and I guess it was about how to get money and stuff like that. One of the phrases that's often mentioned when coming to the conspiracy of 9/11 is the need for a catastrophic event like a new Pearl Harbor. Obviously, if you know about the story of Pearl Harbor, even there is a conspiracy about that now, that it may not have been exactly how it appeared, whether it was allowed to happen or whether it actually even was the Americans themselves. We know that these things have happened in the past. We know through the Second World War there were ships and vessels that were sunk. We know the term false flag comes from the idea of putting a false flag on a ship and pretending to be someone else so that you can claim they did something, and then it's all about that, the thing I've talked about before, that you need some kind of moral event to be able to allow you to do something so you don't look like the bad person. So obviously this new, they needed an event like that, and obviously they were asked afterwards, was this your new Pearl Harbor? And obviously it's the closest event. It's very similar in scenarios to Pearl Harbor. That in itself doesn't mean it's a conspiracy, but it is coincidental that they needed something like that and they got something like that. And obviously they had this idea of invading 7 different countries. And without this event, I don't think it would have been so easy to convince American people and people of the world that to join in, and this was the right idea. Obviously, there's the planes that flew into the Twin Towers. People, especially experts who have flown planes themselves, have said that the speed they were going at and the way the plane banks, it looks very experienced, you know. And remember that the claim, the official story, is that these 19, mostly Saudis, if not all of them Saudis, were inexperienced. And that, remember there is one famous story of a person who I don't know if it was Atta himself, that he took flying lessons and only asked about takeoff and never asked about landing. So these were people that couldn't be that experienced to fly that fast, speeds that they say they're not even possible to fly at that speed in those types of planes, and managed to bank and to hit the middle of 2 buildings. It's, obviously if you play computer games it might be very easy, but in reality to do that at that speed, the drag and all that kind of stuff, the fact is that expert pilots are saying that they would find it difficult to do. Makes you question, how is it possible that people who just decided with box cutters that they were going to fly to the World Trade Center were able to do it, let alone the fact that how they were managed to fly the most secure country on the planet, 4 planes that they were managed to take over, and other than one hit their main target. I guess you could question, why did that Shanksville one in Pennsylvania, why did it not succeed? And that's possible that we needed that for the human hero aspect of the story that it gave us, that these people they fought, and they stopped an event taking place. It gave that heart to the story, and that fact that it was so close that they could have saved themselves. Obviously I'm talking about people that, I feel bad in some ways thinking, because I don't know what could have happened, what couldn't happen, and if it did happen then these people died, and it seems wrong with me to question these things, but the fact is that there is so much of it that I'm presented with that makes no sense. And this is where it comes to the idea of how you can program people. I was thinking about this just now, that how there's so much I've just gone through for the last 3 of these programs, that and YouTube is full of it. There's the Inconvenient Truth, there's lots of different videos out there that go through this much better than I have, and then there's science to it and detail to it and examples of all the things that I've been mentioning. And when you see the official story, it doesn't match with all these things that question the actual story. And it shows how, is it possible then that you could be programmed that as long as, if they wanted this to happen, if they knew it's going to happen and they allowed it to happen, let's say it that way, that makes it maybe slightly better, that they allowed it to happen, they helped it happen, and they had people on the ground that were ready to speak to journalists that knew what to say to be able to keep the story to the way they wanted it. And so, all the things that we hear about are people saying, they heard explosions beforehand. They made sure that someone who spoke really well was on the TV all the time, and they never mentioned that. So in our minds, on the mainstream media, we don't hear that. So is it possible then to create a story from the event? The fact is also with the planes, if there were never any planes, if they were holograms, if they were CGI, if they were, it seems impossible to say that. Is it possible that a plane, you could make a hologram of it and just the building exploded at the right time? I mean, that's not impossible. There, with CGI, with the, if you had a helicopter up there, which we know there were lots of helicopters up there, if they had a way of doing that. The fact is also, sorry, I was interrupted there. I was just trying to say about, is it possible that someone down could have been, told what to say, and then make sure that, and I was talking about the holographic type of thing. I mean, it seems like impossible, but I'm sure, you see these types of things on events in Las Vegas and things like that, where they do those types of things, and we all know that defense always have things that are more advanced. So it's not impossible. And the second one, maybe that never happened, it was just a bomb. There were people that described that they never saw a plane. Obviously you only need one person to say I saw a plane, and then obviously if you have this a CGI film already, these helicopters that gave the news, that could be pre-filmed. They could just insert the green screen the plane inside. It's not an impossibility. It seems a bit lavish. It should be a lot more easier just to let the plane actually fly in there. But yeah, and it doesn't really sort of say that it was a conspiracy. It's just one of those extra things that goes along with the story. The other thing is also the Donald Rumsfeld the day before mentioned there was 2.3 trillion that had been lost. And obviously the Pentagon had those records, and Building 7, I believe, had the CIA, Secret Service, IRS and Department of Defense. So there was a lot of information that was lost by those 2 buildings getting struck. Maybe it was to hide something up, maybe it was, that may just be an extra thing. I think the main reason is obviously to get involved in these wars, and maybe because they had all this money missing, that they needed a lot more money. And obviously we all know that war creates money. And obviously then the other thing is the thermite that was found in the building, in the rubble, and the lava that was seen, that NIST say they never saw it, and no one else ever saw it, despite there is video of it, and firefighters said they saw it, and they said it looked like a foundry. But the fact that they found thermite, that's a big problem, because obviously thermite could create everything that could bring down those 3 buildings in the way that we saw them. I suppose the thing is, if you take out, and there's some videos on YouTube that do this, if you take out the planes and you just watch these things, it looks like an explosion, and it looks like buildings falling down through demolition. But my big problem is, if you look at it logically, I mean, how come all 3 buildings, despite having different circumstances, all fell down within their own footprint on the same day? So quickly, compared to if you look at all the other buildings that have been, having office fires and things like that they just, like Grenfell for example, it stayed up, it didn't fall down upon itself. I suppose what we really need is to see another plane hit a building like that and see, does the plane slide through? And I mean, I suppose if you had enough money, that would be the thing you need to do. You need to buy a big steel building and buy a plane and remote control fly into the building at that same speed and see, does it slip through the concrete like that, and will the building fall down? But the problem is, because we've seen it on television, because so many people we trust, like journalists and experts and this, that and the other, have said, this is what we saw. You know, it's like the social experiments, you know, that if someone tells you these things, then you start believing them. You don't even question them yourself. That's part of the allure of TV. You don't have to question. It's being brought to you. Your world is being brought to you, and they tell you how to see it. Anyway, take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.